There's a question most people ask the wrong way. They ask, is this the right partner? But the more honest question is this: what kind of relationship does my current inner state even allow? Because relationships don't just happen. They don't appear because of luck, fate, or timing. They emerge from patterns. And until you understand your pattern, changing partners often changes nothing. Most people think they keep meeting the same kind of person by accident. The emotionally unavailable one, the intense one, the one who needs fixing, the one who feels incredible at first and painful later. It doesn't look like a system, it looks like bad luck. But when you zoom out, something uncomfortable becomes clear. You're not choosing randomly, you're choosing consistently, not consciously, but predictably. Here's the part almost no one tells you. You don't choose partners based on who is good for you. You choose them based on what your nervous system recognizes. Familiar tension feels safer than unfamiliar peace. Intensity feels more real than calm. And effort often feels like love if love once had to be earned. So before we talk about relationship types, we need to be clear about one thing. These aren't labels, they're phases. They reflect where you are internally, not who you are forever. If you stay with me, you'll see exactly which phase you're operating from, and what becomes possible when you stop repeating it. The karmic phase. This is where many people begin. Karmic relationships feel immediate, magnetic, almost inevitable. You meet at a party. Within an hour, you're talking about things you don't usually share. It feels like coming home. Conversation flows, chemistry explodes. Everything feels meaningful. But what's happening isn't destiny. It's recognition. Not of the person, but of a familiar emotional pattern. These relationships replay unresolved loops, old attachment wounds, old dynamics. They feel important because they're unfinished. 3 months later, you're in the same fight your parents had, the same dynamic your ex triggered, different person, same script. Karmic relationships aren't punishment. They're classrooms. They exist to show you what you've been trying to resolve through other people. When the lesson is learned, the relationship often collapses. Trying to build a future here usually means repeating the cycle, just with more exhaustion. The twin flame phase. This phase is often mistaken for destiny. Twin flame connections feel transformative. They trigger growth, confrontation, identity shifts. You don't just fall in love, you unravel. Your fears activate, your defenses crack, your shadow comes into view. These relationships create awareness through friction. They show you everything you've been avoiding, the parts of yourself you don't want to see, the patterns you thought you'd outgrown. They feel powerful because they destroy illusions. But intensity is not integration. Twin flame connections are mirrors, not homes. They reveal what needs healing, but they rarely provide the stability to actually heal it. Growth is possible here, but permanence usually isn't. The relationship burns too hot to sustain. What feels like transformation often becomes exhaustion. Trying to stay often leads to burnout. The toxic phase. This is where pattern blindness becomes dangerous. Toxic relationships don't survive because people enjoy pain. They survive because they regulate something: fear, worth, control, abandonment. The relationship becomes the emotional regulator. You don't stay because you're weak. You stay because leaving would collapse an identity. And toxicity becomes especially stable when dependency enters the picture. Children, financial imbalance, career sacrifices, roles you can't easily step out of. At that point, the relationship isn't chosen anymore. It's managed. Growth becomes threatening because it destabilizes the system. If one partner evolves, the other often loses security. Not out of cruelty, but fear. The deeper the dependency, the higher the price of change, and the easier it becomes to confuse loyalty with stagnation. How patterns show up. If every relationship feels like déjà vu, you're cycling through karmic patterns. If you can't imagine calm without calling it boredom, you're caught between intensity and safety. If you need crisis to feel close, that's not passion. That's pattern repetition. If growth feels threatening to your partner, you're outgrowing the phase. And if reading this feels uncomfortable, you're probably closer to a shift than you think. At this point, most people do one of two things. They switch partners and repeat the pattern, or they start observing themselves. This is the real turning point, not finding someone new, but noticing what you keep recreating. Because you can change partners 10 times and stay in the same phase. Or you can stay with the same person and change the entire dynamic. Growth doesn't demand replacement, it demands awareness. And this is where many people get stuck. Because not every partner is meant to stay. Some people enter your life for a phase, not because they're wrong, but because they fit who you were at the time. They matched your nervous system, your fears, your unfinished questions. That doesn't make them failures, it makes them accurate. The confusion begins when we mistake relevance for longevity. Once you begin to change, the relationship changes too. If both people are willing to question their roles, their habits, and the identity the relationship was built on, growth together is possible. But if only one person evolves, the connection begins to resist. Not dramatically. Through tension, through subtle discouragement, through the pressure to stay the same. At that point, the relationship isn't about love anymore. It's about preservation. And recognizing that isn't cruelty, it's maturity, the gap. And this is exactly why the next phase feels so unsettling. Because when growth begins, intensity often fades, the chaos quiets, the drama softens, the emotional spikes disappear. And instead of relief, many people feel panic. They compare the present to the past. They mistake calm for boredom. They assume something is missing. This is where people start questioning the relationship, not because something is wrong, but because nothing is screaming anymore. But what's missing isn't love. It's stimulation. This gap asks a question most people avoid. Do I want intensity or do I want depth? Because depth doesn't chase you. It waits. The soulmate phase. This is not the relationship people fantasize about. It isn't explosive. It doesn't consume your identity. It's stable, predictable, quiet. And that's exactly why it scares people who grew up in emotional storms. Soulmate relationships require something rare. The ability to stay present without needing constant activation. They're built on co-regulation, not chemical highs. You don't disappear here. You don't perform. And for many, that feels unfamiliar. Not because it's wrong, but because it's new. Here's the key realization. Soulmate is not a person. It's a phase you grow into. You don't find it. You become someone who can sustain it. And that doesn't always mean staying with the same partner. Some relationships grow together. Others are phase partners, right for who you were, not for who you're becoming. So the real question isn't, which relationship type am I in? It's this. Am I trying to grow, or am I trying to stay familiar? Because once the pattern changes, the options change too. Not magically, not instantly, but inevitably. If you pay attention long enough, you'll notice something. The relationship you're in is often the most honest feedback about your internal state. Not where you want to be, not who you imagine yourself to be, but who you are actually operating as. Before you look for a different partner, ask yourself this question. What would have to change in me for a different kind of relationship to even feel right? And if that answer scares you, you're probably closer than you think.